Go Who's and welcome to the 4-3-4 defense. My name is Deuce Prince. I'm a Charlottesville, Virginia native, lifelong UVA football fan, and former college offensive lineman. And today I wanted to talk about Virginia's defense versus the NC State offense. And for that task, there was no other person I went to other than my brother John. John is also Charlottesville, Virginia native, lifelong UVA football fan, but former college defensive lineman. So, John, how's it going over on the dark side?
Going good. It's a good place to be.
You know, when I was watching this film, there was a whole suite of notes that I was taking, and about half of them were asterisks, like ask John about this because he's going to know a little bit better than I will. You know, I understand defense from the perspective of the offensive side of the ball, whereas John, you understand it a little bit more natively. So as we get towards this week 0 contest with NC State, like, first off, how are you feeling as a Virginia fan headed into this game?
I feel pretty good. I would say just with the amount of transfers brought in and kind of the how the team can respond from the successes of last year, a little bit of a question mark. I don't know if they're going to be able to. I'm interested to see if they can recreate kind of that lightning in a bottle that they struck last year.
And what do you think contributed last year to that, like, lightning in a bottle effect? Because I think a lot of people have seen it and feel it, but they can't put their finger on it.
Yeah, I think getting a lot of really important transfers, I think flew under the radar. Maybe in the portal for Virginia that really stepped up,
Mm-hmm.
and getting the right guys at the right moment, like Chandler Morris or Jamari Taylor, like just certain guys that may have gone under recruited or didn't really have a place in being able to find those breakout guys.
Mm. And I think this is one of the more interesting games on the schedule because I feel like NC State is kind of where a lot of Virginia fans would be very okay with Virginia football getting to. And they still do a lot of those similar things, getting kind of those under the radar guys. So, you know, if it's any solace to Virginia fans, you can still find under the radar guys and win 8-9 games a year. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing. And when before we get into the 2026 matchup against the Wolfpack, I want to go into 2025 NC State and kind of feel out like who they were, because obviously every single year kind of aspects of the offense are going to bleed into the next year's offense. And I feel like there's nowhere you can start other than CJ Bailey at the quarterback position. John, talk to me a little bit about CJ Bailey.
I mean, he's electric. One thing I didn't really appreciate until I started preparing for this episode is how tall he actually is.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of people, he's a tall, lanky. He's put on a little bit more muscle, but he's really a taller guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people really appreciate how big he actually is and how much that affects his release point and how that changes things, especially up front for defensive linemen. Being able to match hands or bat balls down, having that extra height changes that release point and pretty much eliminates that from the game plan.
Yeah, I mean that's something that, you know, Virginia has played with shorter quarterbacks for the last, say, 4 or 5-ish years, basically ever since Bryce Perkins left. You know, Brennan Armstrong wasn't super tall, Anthony Colandrea wasn't super tall, Chandler Morris isn't super tall. You know, this is a guy who is taller than most of his offensive linemen, and so he has no trouble seeing the defense, and then also, like you said, not having to worry that much about getting the ball batted down.
Yeah, and that's something you can't replicate unless you have a guy like that on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think back to the first touchdown he threw in the game last year.
Yep.
That post over the middle. I mean, the pocket gets so condensed and so tight, and that was one of the first times that Virginia actually was able to not only get the width of the pocket down, but the depth. And it really just didn't matter because that release point was perfectly where it needed to be to get it over that linebacker.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to contend with for all 60 minutes of the game. You know, with that NC State offense, they spelled CJ Bailey's talent with two tremendous talents One being Hollywood Smothers at the running back position, almost 1,000 yards on the ground, 6 total touchdowns. The dude averaged 6 yards a carry, which is just obscene.
It's ridiculous. I mean, if you hand a guy the ball and it's 2nd and 4, and that just opens up what you're able to do so much.
I mean, and granted, there were a lot of big explosive runs built into that, so it wasn't necessarily every single play. But then again, you'd also sometimes rather take the 50-yard run than 6 every single time. Hollywood Smothers is now at Texas playing with Arch Manning, kind of the transfer portal taketh in this situation. And then when it comes to the tight end position, arguably I would say their best pass catcher is now in the NFL, Justin Jolie. I always thought it was Jolly, but John, you have a personal connection as to why you knew how to pronounce Jolie the right way. John, tell us about Justin Jolie in person.
Yeah, we played Jolie in high school. Me, Deuce, and our brother James went to Stepinac. Jolie went to Iona. Very, very talented player early on, and it's been cool to follow kind of his career from afar and see the things he's been able to go on and do. But I mean, they lined him up at quarterback, receiver, running back, tight end. I mean, he's bigger and stronger than people appreciate.
Yes.
And I think that really gave him such a dynamic look last year for them.
He was easily, I think, their biggest pass threat. And thankfully now he is worried about the AFC West, which we will not have to worry about. And then wanted to kind of do a holistic look at that Wolfpack offensive line. They averaged 145 yards on the ground rushing, which is by no means bad. But I also think with a quarterback like C.J. Bailey, you're only going to run the ball so much. They allowed 20 sacks last year, which gives them about probably like 1.33 to 1.4 a game, which is a little bit higher than I honestly expected, John.
Yeah, I think, and I didn't watch too much beyond the Virginia game last year, but when it comes to those rushing numbers, like I looked at the first drive and for the first couple of drives, and C.J. Bailey started like 7 for 7.
Yeah.
And they just kept on feeding him the ball. It wasn't about until the late in the second drive, kind of the third drive, they started to really run the ball more and get into some of those looks.
Right.
But they just really were able to kind of let him play. And whether that turned into scramble yards or being able to figure it out in the pass game, I mean, when you have a guy like C.J. Bailey, it's almost like, you kind of pass to set up the run.
Right. And like you mentioned, John, the rest of the season did occur. They played other teams besides Virginia who actually had a chance to study some tape. This team was one of 2025 Virginia Tech's 3 wins. So, when I was talking about the NC State program, what they had to do, I was like, we have to eliminate, if you're a Wolfpack fan, we have to eliminate games like that. But I think there were some instances where teams got some film on CJ and this offense, and they were able to shut some things down. But, I think they were maybe not shut down, maybe contain is probably the right word. And when it comes to scheming against that ability to contain and some of the efforts, we have to look at this kind of NC State coaching staff. We did a deep dive on this earlier last week on the 4-3-4 defense, but kind of the main notes. Dave Doran, head coach, he is native to the defensive side of the ball. Not to say that he's not involved on the offensive side, but every coach kind of has their specialty that they fall back on. So Kurt Roper, the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, I think is going to be leaned on a lot. John, your program at Indiana State that you played at, defensive-minded head coach, then the offensive coordinator is kind of over, has a lot more responsibility on the offensive side of the ball, right?
Yeah. I would say our head coach did a really good job of letting our defensive coordinator be himself. Mm-hmm. He definitely had inputs and opinions, but when it came to the offensive coordinator, he really had control of the show, and you really get to lean on and see what their identity is.
Mm-hmm. And then, assistants wise, there's a lot of experience on this assistant staff. Joker Phillips, assistant head coach and wide receivers coach, former head coach of the University of Kentucky, one of the better recruiters in the entire country. Garrett Tujay, who many Virginia fans will know was our offensive line coach during the late 2010s during the Bronco Mendenhall era. Then we've got Todd Goebel, special teams and running backs coach, and then Gavin Locklear at the tight end position. This is a very experienced offensive coaching staff that is going to be able to go basically year for year, kind of notepad for notepad with this Virginia defensive staff. I think it's going to be, with Kurt Roper at offensive coordinator having a defensive head coach, and then John Rudzinski at Virginia having a offensive head coach in Tony Elliott. This is like a chance for these two coordinators to really go at it. It's like a battle of wits for these two more than anything.
Oh, absolutely. One thing I definitely want to give the NC State as a whole administration and program is really sticking by Doran.
Yes.
They haven't quite reached the pinnacle or the mountaintop. Mm-hmm. And I think when a guy's been there for so long, it can be easy to kind of be reactionary and say, let's go out and try to find someone better, or someone more exciting or flashy. Mm-hmm. But sticking with a guy that's been there for so long, who understands the university and the culture, and I think the only coach tenured longer than him, at least in the ACC, is Dabo.
Yeah.
And that probably puts Doran up there, at least now, in the country. Yes. The only coaches I can think of being there longer at their school is Kirby.
Yep.
And maybe a couple other coaches in some other programs. But I think when you have a chance to build that continuity, it really means something.
It gives you kind of a program identity, and every now and again, they've kind of played for 8 wins and they've been able to get to that threshold, and then every now and again you get a collection of talent like a CJ Bailey, like a Hollywood Smothers, like Justin Joly, and it's on NC State then to capitalize on that collection of talent to then break through. And I think that's where most of the Wolfpack fans that are unhappy with this current regime currently lies, because as much as I think Duke Scott is a good running back and I think they've got some good additions, Hollywood Smothers is not a easy guy to replace when the University of Texas is throwing that bag at them. Speaking of those replacements, let's get into this 2026 NC State offense. In white, we have returning players, and then in orange, we have, or yellow, we have guys that transferred in. This is still a majority, kind of retained program where they've been able to keep guys. The fact that they've been able to keep CJ Bailey is tremendously impressive, honestly.
I agree. I think, maybe after this year, I can't speak much on the situation, but I would be shocked if he wasn't hearing if his camp wasn't hearing offers from SEC or Big Ten schools after this year.
Yeah. I mean, it's a CJ Bailey is going to spend his time there. Maybe he's the kind of guy, I don't know the color of CJ Bailey's soul, hey, I'm going to go and get my undergrad and I'm going to, give the 4 years that I committed to this school and then go on and do something else. Or, hey, if this year goes a certain way, this is a stacked quarterback class. If certain guys fall the wrong way, you never know what happens NFL-wise. At that 6'6" frame, if he gets a couple more, if he eats a couple more pub subs and gets a little bit bulkier, that 6'6" frame, that's not a bad draft prospect right there.
Not at all.
And then at the running back position to replace Hollywood Smothers, you have Duke Scott. Duke is a internal promotion. He was within the program. He actually made some decent plays last year. At the wide receiver position, we've got Davion Dozier, who is a transfer, I believe, from Appalachian State, maybe, or East Carolina. He's from the state. And then JoJo Trader, another transfer in, and then Keenan Jackson, who is a returning wide receiver. Preston Douglas at tight end is a returner who got kind of promoted after Justin Joly left. And then on the offensive line, Daniel Cruz and Jamarion McCrimon are our two. McCrimmon, I totally am butchering that name. That's an East-West Key and Peele name right there. And then Cayman Smith, Spike Souls, and Teague Anderson round out the offensive line. Spike Souls Jr. is an all-name team guy. I like that. That is a all-name center right there.
That is an incredible offensive line name. I think one thing that stood out to me about the offensive line in particular, having the left guard and center come back, I was super impressed with the middle threes ability in the pass game.
Yes.
They really stunted the Virginia's ability to push the depth of the pocket.
Yes.
And kind of flush CJ Bailey out. And, their tackles did a really good job of baiting the defensive ends upfield and creating some lanes for Bailey.
Yep.
So I think having those two guys come back in the middle is huge for them.
And with that offensive line, Daniel Cruz coming in, he was very highly touted offensive lineman out of high school, and 2J is a good offensive line coach. He's going to be able to get these guys in good shape and ready to play this year. The fact, like you said, John, the front three's ability to kind of keep the front of the pocket stable and then let the defensive ends rush upfield. We'll see some of this in the tape study. CJ Bailey had some wide open B gaps to run through and basically gave him an RPO where he could either get 10 yards by tucking it and running or 20 yards by just throwing a touch pass over a linebacker. As we turn over to the Virginia side of the ball, a similar story of retention. Up front on the defensive line, Fisher K-Mac, Jason Hammond, and Anthony Britton all returning, with Matthew Fobbs-White, the projected other defensive end starter, coming in from Baylor. Both our linebackers return in Maddox Marcellus and Cam Robinson. And then defensive backfield also is a position that I think dominates in the transfer portal for a lot of schools. But, hey, more than half are our original guys, with Ethan Minter, Corey Costner, and Donovan Platt, and then Brandon Hillman and Jacoby Henderson coming in through the transfer portal. John, is there anyone on this defensive unit here for Virginia that stands out for you and you think is going to take like a big step in 2026?
Well, I caught some flack for saying Cam Robinson was going to be a very dominant player in the ACC this year.
Yeah, that was the Hokies.
and I stand by that. I think him along with Fisher K-Mac, I think everyone up front really has an important job this week, but especially the linebackers being able to try and discern when CJ Bailey's when he's scrambling to throw or when he's scrambling to run. And if those linebackers get antsy and they start to creep up, they're going to get hit on some routes and some broken plays that can really be explosive and turn the game around.
I think, when you're going through your install for the year, everyone kind of understands the same plays and stuff like that. But when you have an experienced unit like this, especially in the linebacker room, there is kind of a elevated understanding that just plain install can't teach you. John, on the defense, I know I've experienced that on the offensive side of the ball when you've got a group that has played together for so many years. On the defensive side of the ball, talk to me a little bit about that kind of advanced understanding of what you need to do to be successful on defense.
Yeah, up front, especially when you've played with guys for a little bit, you start to get a feel for how the other guys up front, especially on your side, want to pass rush. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that could be very important in this game for the D tackles as well as the defensive ends is cover rushing. Okay. So if Fisher K-Mac sees, he wants to take his shot at the B gap. He wants to knife in there. He sees a set that he likes. Jason Hammond's got to be able to feel that and wrap outside.
Yeah.
So, I don't know specifically what their rules are on that, but we kind of had the freedom after playing with each other for a while. You got to be able to feel that and help your teammates out. As my defensive line coach said, it's got to be 4 guys rushing as one.
Yeah, and it's something that helps as a tendency breaker as well. There's nothing as an offensive lineman we hate more than the defensive line doing something that we've never seen before. And so, if you have a guy like Fisher and Jason who have played together for so long, they know how much latitude they have with each other to make each other right. They have the
Yeah.
chance to do some off-schedule things that will
Right.
make a unit that has played together for a really long time really, really confused.
Yeah, and the tackles are new.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had a chance to play with these guards yet in a real game. Obviously, I'm not sure when they got to NC State, but they may have had spring ball. They've had some fall camp,
Mm-hmm.
but the bullets haven't started flying with those pairs yet. So I think Fisher and Jason really have a chance to show some of that chemistry they have together.
Yeah, and I mean, shoot, Matthew Fobbs-White has been a super productive player wherever he's gone, and then the other part is these defensive lines, John. They're almost operating more like hockey lines than actually like a offensive line where you kind of just grind it out all 4 quarters. Talk to me about kind of like that philosophy of just like, hey, we need your max effort series here, or even like your max effort 4 plays.
Yeah, it's such an interesting position because besides running back, there really is no other position like it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really rotating players as much as you are up front. So you really got to have 10 to 12 guys that can go out there. Maybe 10 through 12 can't give you a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But they gotta be able to give you a couple plays, and the expectation has got to be the position,
right.
Especially with rotating guys out there. So it's interesting how everyone needs to understand how to play with each other, and you're getting the chemistry down for a bunch of guys, not just 5 or 4 receivers, but you got to understand how 6 or 8 different guys like to play.
Right, because you've got Fisher, who's 6'7", has like the longest reach in college football, and then you've got some like smaller kind of squatter defensive ends. Jason, and on the interior, has to play differently based on which defensive end is in the game, and you have to kind of develop that that teamwork together. We can for the offensive side of the ball, when Virginia's in 11 personnel, we can pretty much tell who's going to be in the game. But on the defensive side of the ball, we can set this lineup as much as we want. We might see this maybe 5% of the time if we consider all 11 positions. Someone is going to be rotating in and rotating out to stay fresh. When we get to, that defensive philosophy, when you've watched Virginia play on the defensive side of the ball, what are some of the things that you've noticed kind of like core principle-wise that you think stand out about this defense?
I think obviously watching the NC State game week 0, there's going to be some things you got to coach up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most of the year it was really fundamentally sound. Guys are playing their keys and being where they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
They may not always make the play. Sometimes the offense has a perfect play drawn up, but most of the time you're going to have guys in the spots they need to be, and then it's just up to them to make the play.
Because I think, this is a defense full of playmakers, and so, if everyone's playing fundamentally sound, someone is going to make a play. There are guys that are looking for an opportunity. I kind of drew up 3 main keys for this defense, and I want to hear your thoughts on it or anything you would want to add to these keys.
Okay.
First and foremost, against this quarterback, CJ Bailey, pass rush lane discipline, I think, is probably number 1 priority.
Absolutely. Rush lanes are key in this game. Understanding where you are, who's inside of you, who's outside of you. You got to understand where you fit in the scope of the defense. That's absolutely paramount.
Yeah. Then number 2, change the post-snap picture. Any quarterback or any player on offense is going to kind of take the snapshots, basically. This is what the defense looks like. This is what I'm going to do against it. Virginia, I think, has to continue to do as much as possible to make the picture after the ball is snapped different than the one beforehand.
Yeah, I think you can get caught, especially if a team's going fast or you get hit on explosive play where you just want to line up and play.
Mm-hmm.
But getting to some if you want to roll your coverages or getting to some sim pressures, can be very beneficial. CJ Bailey started all of last year, but a guy who doesn't have he's on a 4-year starter. He hasn't seen everything there is to see.
Yeah.
I think being able to change the picture and try to make him think post snap and take that extra second to delay his thought process could really help.
Yeah, because you can tell when Bailey's playing off of instinct, and he is a dangerous quarterback when he's doing that because he's got a great feel for the game. And so that's a great point about making him think as opposed to react and play. And then the third, I think this is something that's probably on the key points board for every defense across the country, but limit explosive plays. It bears repeating again.
Yeah, I mean, early explosives can be critical.
Yeah,
I mean, you want to set the tone for how a game's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Or the first couple series are huge. You kind of get a feel for what they want to be in, what kind of personnel, because we haven't seen this team play yet.
Right.
This team is different than last year's team.
Mm-hmm.
So we gotta understand, and both for NC State and Virginia. So we got to see how each team is going to react.
Yes, and not all touchdowns feel the same. This goes for offense and defense. If Virginia kicks off, because remember, this is a home game in front of what is trending to be a sellout crowd at Scott Stadium. If they score on the first drive, if it's a 10-play drive that goes for 5 minutes, if Virginia makes some plays in the meantime, and they just end up scoring, that feels a lot better than if NC State immediately throws a 60-yard bomb and puts 7 points on the board immediately. Like, everyone deflates after that. So, if you're going to give up a bend but don't break touchdown, just do it over an explosive defensive play.
Yeah, if they earn it, they earn it.
Yeah.
They got guys on scholarship too. They have phenomenal players too. Sometimes they're just going to get you.
Right.
But coverage busts or missed tackles that lead to explosives, those cannot happen.
Yeah, this is where one portal window helps a lot. I think getting everyone in the building for spring ball, whereas last year you saw some of the coverage busts that we had. You could tell it was a defensive back group that hadn't played together for more than a month.
Yeah,
and so I think one portal window will actually help solve a lot of that. To our viewers, I have long bemoaned our inability to get access to what I'm about to show you, and I'm very glad I now have access to show it. We now have some all freaking 22 film of the Virginia Cavaliers, and so we're going to break some down. And every one of the plays, all 6 plays that I want to show you, have something to do with some of the principles that we talked about up here. And so it's going to tie in. So, if you don't understand what pass rush lane discipline necessarily means, you don't have to be like, oh, yeah, nod along and not know. We're going to actually, get into it. So, the first thing I want to talk about is CJ Bailey's mobility and show you on film some of this. So, John, what are you seeing here immediately?
So, immediately, I see tons of open space. This was one of the first plays that I really took note of. This is earlier. I think this is on the first drive.
This is the first drive.
Yeah. So I really noticed, once again, left guard and center really going to work, not allowing the D-line to get up, the D tackles to get upfield, and those defensive ends are kind of flying upfield and creating that space. And once again, you see those linebackers start to creep forward a little bit, which lets him fall behind and get an explosive play. This is kind of exactly all the notes.
You can see James Jackson has this play, number one, has this play covered.
Yeah.
He has this dead to rights over the middle, and then you see when Mitchell Melton kind of runs upfield a little bit, all of a sudden, James Jackson has to take those literally 2 steps up, and all of a sudden, boom, a completion over the middle. We're going to start with the stuff that we need to kind of contain, and then we're going to get into the stuff that I want Virginia to do a little bit more of. But, that rush, that kind of discipline of, even though upfield may be open, not always taking it is critical. The next play I want to take a look at, this is Duke Scott, number 4 at running back. He's going to be their starter heading into this year, which I'm glad he actually got some reps so we have some film. They're taking an inverted veer handoff here, and you can see that Duke Scott he looks like a very thick running back, but like he's got some burst to the outside. John, as a defensive lineman, talk to me about some of the issues that come with like playing the read against a mobile quarterback like CJ Bailey.
Yeah, I think this is really where John Rosinski has to shine. He has to make his mark by scheming up defenses where you have an answer for everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what their rules are, but we see the right tackle kind of skip pull. And
Yes.
that's not something you see a whole lot. You see guard tackle pull. And as a defensive end, you're taught you see pull, you got to chase that.
Right.
So you, as a linebacker here, you can't get frozen by all that pull. You got to be able to see what's going on, see the full picture.
Right.
So I think as a defensive lineman, you can't get caught staring in the backfield. You just have to trust your keys, even if it leads you away from the play.
We'll get to a rep of playing the mesh really, really well later on. Actually, John, would you call this bash?
I would.
Yeah, this is bash. I've been looking at this the whole time, and this is bash. To viewers that don't understand the difference, it really doesn't matter. But this is what we would call this QB counter bash, where the running back is going in the direction away from the pulling offensive lineman. It's kind of like a mind trip and kind of goes against things, which is actually kind of why it works. And so, playing the mesh point like this, our defensive end here, number 6, Z Moore, he is a little bit more of an interior facing defensive end. So this isn't ideal for him position wise, but just kind of a situation where you have to figure it out. This is the play that we were talking about earlier, the explosive play over the top. This is the kind of explosive play that we really need to limit.
Yeah, I mean, this is a phenomenal play.
Great throw.
Great throw. And this is really what I meant by when he's changing the launch point of the ball by being so tall. Normally, if you have your regular quarterback who's probably like 6'1" to 6'3",
right,
he might not feel as comfortable getting this ball off being so squeezed in.
Yeah.
But because he can lift that ball over the middle of the field safety, he just changes the game. Now, what I would love to see here is the linebacker kind of gets frozen on this play action, and he can't decide what he wants to do.
Oh,
He's either got to take the running back or he's got to go.
Yeah.
And I think when they get into some of these play action scenarios, the linebackers especially have to make a choice, and the defensive ends have to be really good at facing those base blocks. And once they recognize play action, they got to get out of it quick. They got to have a quick transition out.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at quarterback mechanics, weight transfer when you're throwing the ball is really critical. And you can see, even from this like kind of high angle view, you can see his transfer forward is very smooth. And he's not he's got guys crashing in all over him, and it looks like he's throwing in warm-ups. And so, like you said, if our middle linebacker here, I believe that's Landon Danley, if he just committed and ran, his weight might stay a little bit more on his back foot, and that throw might kind of flutter a little bit more, or all of a sudden it doesn't go as fast. Literally a pinpoint throw over the midfield safety. I mean, this is, it's fundamentally great, but it's something that we definitely want to limit having happen.
Yeah, sometimes you got to tip your cap. I would also say middle of the field safety. This looks like cover one.
Yeah.
You can't let anything behind you. I think staying on top, playing top down is so important. He's getting out of his break faster, flipping his hips. I mean, when you're playing a quarterback who can put such a touch on a ball, staying disciplined is so key.
This is, I think, kind of a mark of a defensive unit that did not have all that much time to spend together, because you can see he's trying to choose between the running back and the slot receiver there.
As soon as the linebacker takes off, he takes that half jolt.
Right.
And when you're playing a quarterback who I believe is of this caliber, that's all he needs.
And we can Monday morning quarterback all we want, but you give your defense a chance if he has to check down to the running back.
Right.
Cam
Right.
Robinson or, Maddox Marcellus or any of these guys might just do their thing and make a great play. But this, that's all of a sudden strike up the band. Momentum is now shifted, and, you've
Yeah.
got a clip that they're going to be playing when CJ Bailey gets drafted, I think. And so, with the plays that we've seen here, we've kind of seen some of what didn't work last year. Now I want to transfer over to what I do think really did work well for this defense and talk about some of the things we want to maximize. And, this is rush lane discipline right here. This is a great rep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great secondary contain from number 30 there, realizing that 90 ain't getting there. You got to know your personnel. You got to know who you're out there with. And seeing that you have no one in your area, in your zone, as a secondary contained player, being able to force him to the sideline is huge.
Shout out my boy Jameer Carter, who actually had 2 sacks against in the preseason this week.
I mean, he's given full effort. I love it. I mean, he is full hip to cheek sprinting.
But yeah, you can see like this. Landon Danley actually makes up for a previous error and actually does a great job kind of giving him that surface. And this is what we talk about when we talked about the defensive ends not getting too far upfield to our viewer. Like the fact that he had to bounce out as opposed to moving up in the pocket. You might think, hey, if he's bouncing outside, he's got more room, but he also has less protection when it comes to blockers. They don't know where he is in the pocket. So you can see all the offensive line leaves the screen after he moves outside the tackle box. So this is something that we definitely want to keep going. And also, good little stunt here from the defensive line.
Yeah, stunts are a great way to try and, fool the quarterback into seeing something he's not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great way to generate pressure. I think that DNs do a great job of trying to get pressure up the middle and trying to pick those tackles and guards to try and free up their DTs.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a great job of just kind of, hey, they're not going to get there. That's fine.
Yeah.
But they're going to they're going to make it as hard as possible. I think CJ Bailey is a lot better when he's running forward and throwing than when he's running to the side and throwing.
Right, because at this point in the play right here, he's playing backyard football. Like he's also, as a right-handed quarterback, moving to his right, which means any throw that he wants to make that isn't down the sidelines is across his body. And as anyone who's ever watched the 2009 NFC Championship game when Brett Favre makes the worst decision in quarterback history, like you don't want to be thrown across your body moving right as a righty.
Yeah, and you're not always going to get home every time, but I think up front this is almost as good as it gets, being able to force him to just kind of giving up on the play and throwing it away.
If you're the defensive line coach, like this gets graded as a win. Obviously
this is absolutely a win.
Sacks get you dinner on Monday, but at the same time, this gets graded as 4 for 4. We were fundamentally sound. This is a play that I really, really liked, even though for a lot of people that watched the game, this play just kind of immediately went in one eyeball, went out the other.
Right.
Then we get to kind of simulating some pressures and giving different pictures. So you can see here, Virginia has 6 players immediately mugged up at the defensive line, but ultimately only 5 end up coming on a blitz. John, talk to me about kind of presenting that different picture from the defensive line side before the snap.
Yeah, we had a big rule: no snitching. You can't lean one way or your eyes darting to where you're going to go. And you can't have any tells of what you're going to do next. Mm-hmm. So I think all of these guys being able to sell their rushes, and especially the linebackers, being able to sell their rushes effectively, you got to make the offensive line choose. They're going to say, hey, someone's coming free.
Right.
And hopefully, you get home and you choose right. Virginia did. They were able to get home, get a QB hit, force them into a tight throw.
I mean, you see 6 at the line. You think, well, at least 4 of those guys are going to be coming. And ultimately, the 5th guy ends up being the nickel Devin Neal, who comes kind of flying out of nowhere on the right-hand side of your screen. So it really ends up being a whole different look. We ended up dropping defensive end Mitchell Melton, number 17, into like a hook to curl, which is something you can only do with a former Ohio State defensive end, I think. An
Yeah.
athlete of that type. Like, that's actually good fundamental like coverage. And then, Jam Jackson makes a really solid play on the pass catcher.
Yeah.
And also, John, there are guys swarming to the football. That's the other really good thing about this.
There are. And one other thing I want to shout out is 52 and 6. And especially 6 here.
Yes.
He's in the 3 tech. His job is, at least we call it, is loop to contain. So he is trying to get outside that tackle and not get pinned in by that tackle.
Right.
If he gets pinned in by that tackle who sees 17 dropping, as soon as 17 drops out, he's turning his eyes straight inside.
Yes.
And being able to get outside and not allow him to flush out, he didn't have the time on this one, but another rep he might. And
Right.
that's a lot of green grass for a guy like CJ Bailey if he loops out of there.
Well, and also if you look at 23, Jacob Holmes, if the guard on our left-hand side reads that differently, he's got a free shot at the quarterback.
Right.
If he follows Kazim, number 6, out, all of a sudden we've got 2 guys converging on the quarterback, one of them being a 320-pound defensive tackle, which, you'd much rather probably get a knockdown from 27 than get absolutely bulldozed by Jacob Holmes 23. And, you can see, like, this is just a good way of changing the picture, with those mugged up looks. And I think it's just a tremendous confidence booster when you have a play like that. And then we talked a little bit earlier about playing the mesh point well, containing a mobile quarterback like CJ Bailey. And I think Fisher came back probably, like, this is teach tape to me right here, him on the left-hand side.
No doubt. We called this surfing, just surfing it out, throwing your hands to the side and just kind of keeping your feet going, but you're staying in place and you're watching the mesh point, but you're also watching the back hip of the running back.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of quarterbacks and people have the tendency of when they hand it off, they drop their hands.
Yeah.
So that can be a really visual key for a defensive end. They see the quarterback drop his hands, he doesn't have the ball, then you can go. I will also huge shout out to the 2 big boys in the middle.
Yes, shout out my boy Ja.
Really doing a phenomenal job of eating those double teams. It sucks. You're going to have to eat it. But because they do such a good job of staying firm and being square in their gap, it allows it to roll back off and Fisher to make an easy tackle off the hip of the tackle.
Well, and this is great that you brought that up, because if you watch James Jackson and Landon Danley at linebacker, they are pretty much clean until the point of the tackle. And, the offensive linemen, as a rule, we can't move up until someone firmly takes over the block. And, Jameer and Jason Hammond both ensure that neither the tackle or the guard in the center on either double team, they don't feel great about moving on to the next level here. And like you said, it's an unglamorous job, being that double team eater. John, it's a job that you had to take on in your college career, and it's unglamorous work, but, it allows Fisher to be able to keep the kind of force a decision on the mesh point, and then he can easily kind of just come on down and make the tackle against the running back. John, when we play college football 27 or Madden, on offense and defense, sometimes whether you attack the quarterback or the running back on that option kind of feels a little bit random, or sometimes you can set a blanket adjustment where, we're always going to play the quarterback on the option. When you're playing a team that runs a lot of option football, like in real life, how do defenses actually approach that? Is that something where it's like, hey, use your best judgment, or, game plan specific, we always want to keep the ball out of the quarterback's hands or the running back's hands?
Well, I think the mark of a great defense is being able to change it up with different looks. So we always had different calls, and we would result us doing different things. If we were, an example, for cover 4 or cover 2, we would always play the quarterback. We would always surf it out. But if we were in cover 3 or cover 1, we knew we had someone outside of it. We had a linebacker filling outside of us.
Oh, okay.
So we had a linebacker who was responsible for quarterback, so we would chase and they would flow over the top.
Okay.
I think it's all about what John Rosinski wants to do in terms of giving different looks.
Yeah.
If you play the same way each time, eventually they're going to figure it out and they're going to expose it. But if you can bring different pressures to that side or change up the look, maybe they run an ET stunt where the tackle loops back outside.
Right.
You try to find different ways to manipulate the look and change the look of it.
John, I always love having these conversations with you because you see the game differently from the other side of the ball. Because, in my mind, I think, all right, we're running option football here. We're going to make that read guy wrong no matter what he does. And you game plan that and you plan for it and you can think like, all right, how do we get, either guy in space depending on who gets the ball on that read play. And then a play like this happens where we're wrong either way, and all of a sudden we're like, oh boy, I think we're going to have to reconsider some things.
Yeah, I think that's the mark of a great defense and a great defensive coach is being able to change that. You see 30 fly into the screen here.
Yeah.
Maybe on a different look, 14's chasing and 30's flying like his hair's on fire to come down and be that quarterback player. So you always want to have different looks and change-ups to it. We had some change-ups where that defensive end wouldn't just stop his feet. He would just run directly at the quarterback. Make him give it. Like he is giving it no matter what.
Talk to me, like you said about Ethan Minter, number 30, they're kind of flying in from the left-hand side. Talk about the importance of, because it's hard to tell since this is just the end zone copy, but both safeties are playing deep halves. It's a too high look. How difficult it is for a safety from a too high look to be that involved in the run fit, because if you've watched any Brett Coleman video, the too high looks are generally weaker against the run, whereas even if Fisher didn't make this tackle, it's not going for a gain because Ethan's coming right in.
Yeah, I can't specifically tell how deep they are here, but when you're in a too high look, it's tough as a safety because you really got to make a decision fast, and you got to make a decision now.
Right.
And a lot of times, those safeties, if there's a tight end in the picture, they may have that D gap or they may have that C or B gap, especially in a quarters look. They got to come in and fill that.
Right.
So you really got to trust your corners to be able to know what's going on. But the safeties in the run game, I think, are a super underappreciated part of the picture.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that I think that we can use as teach tape for this game, for this unit, because if we can at least negate some of that read option ability, whether it's the bash play that we saw earlier or more of a straight up read option like this, it's going to make everyone's life a little bit easier on the defensive side of the football. John, I will not press you for a game prediction yet. We are not at that point in the week yet. It is still Monday. The week is still young. But talk to me about your feeling for this defense heading into this game after we've gone over kind of this whole defensive game plan.
It's going to be tough, but I'm feeling good about it. I think having experience and having guys that have played together matters. I think that'll really come into play. And the fact that they know kind of the formula to playing CJ Bailey, not that they figured it out or know exactly what all the answers are, but they've been there before. I believe in John Rosinski as a defensive coordinator. I think he's going to have some great things up his sleeve.
Absolutely. And we've played quarterbacks at least of similar athletic ability. We locked down Darian Mensah in the regular season. Wake Forest last year, we locked down on the defensive side of the ball, and they couldn't do anything but run the ball with their quarterback. Yeah. And, we locked down Kyron Drones, who was an athletic quarterback for Virginia Tech. So, even though this is we presented a lot of danger from CJ Bailey's mobility, we will get into other games on the schedule where we truly locked some people down. John, this might be a great defensive day, but NC State still might put up 24 points on the board.
Right. Yeah. My defensive coordinator would tell us, like, a great defensive game is just our offense scoring one more than them.
And that's
So
okay. If it's 24-27, the tape could be awesome. And they just make some plays. And it's just, the offense, playing a style of football this year that I think is going to really help the defense, dominating time of possession. I think that's something that we'll look at a little bit more holistically later on in the week. But, I think that this defense is going to have a chance to be more well rested, I think, than it was in the game last year.
yeah, and one thing that we didn't mention that I'm really interested in is the involvement of Will Wilson.
Ooh,
Their,
okay.
their backup quarterback, who I saw them bring in on short yardage on multiple occasions to run the ball.
Yes.
They don't want to get CJ Bailey hit,
Yes.
especially in those short yardage situations. So I remember watching the game from last year.
Mm-hmm.
They brought Will Wilson in on fourth and short, forced Tony Elliott to take a timeout and see what was going on, and they went right back to it out of the timeout, and he got that first down. I think he's about 6'3", 250. So he's a very different build than CJ Bailey and provides something very different in the running game that he does. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if they involve him in any packages or anything like that.
Absolutely. I think that's something we'll probably go into a little bit more depth on, like the special teams, like Friday wrap-up episode, for kind of the wrinkles that I think we're going to see from both teams. And it's a great point, because the short yardage game, I thought for NC State was a little bit weak last year. I was not tremendously impressed. They were very reliant on gap scheme runs where a guard pulled. And in my experience, you can pull a guard on short yardage, but you shouldn't do it every single time, because, especially with the safeties that we have, Brandon Hitman Hillman and Ethan Minter, they're going to start screaming through some gaps fairly quickly. This just hit me now. I feel like Ethan Minter could probably raise his draft stock at least by 2 rounds if he starts telling people he's related to Jesse.
Yeah.
Don't tell Jesse Minter that, but at least just, tell the Giants that he's his long lost cousin or something like that. But John, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. To our viewers, if you've made it this far, you are clearly the type of football sicko that should be subscribed to the 434 defense with the bell notifications on. So thank you so much for watching, John. Once again, thank you for your time.
Of course, been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we're going to be hitting it hard throughout the rest of this week, getting ready for an awesome opening game against NC State. Eric Ward, our main kind of fan engagement and person within the athletic department, he has been monitoring diligently the ticket progress ahead of this game, and today he just tweeted out 3 pairs of eye emojis. Man. So, with a little bit under a week to go, things seem to be trending in the right direction.
Sell out Scott, man. Let's do it.
Man, and we haven't even gotten into the silent counts, and I'm not going to jinx it because I want to. I don't even want to talk about the Canes. I just want to see that offensive team, that offensive side of the ball, have to call a timeout in the first quarter because they cannot hear what's going on either. They can't get the play in or they can't get the play run. So I am very, very excited about that. I know all of our viewers, you are too. Thank you so much for watching. We are going to be here on the 434 Defense YouTube channel on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Cavs Corner coming on Tuesday and Friday, and then we will be live on the 434 cast. So if you were not able to make it to Scott Stadium, come join and watch the game with us. We won't be able to live stream the game, and we probably won't be able to live stream all 22, but at least have us on your phone or your iPad and watch the game with us. Have a great night, John. I love you, man. It has been so awesome to talk some ball with you tonight.
Of course. Go Who's.
Absolutely. Have a great night, everyone, and go Who's.